From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Happy Friday and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Donald Trump declares no more debates, and Vladimir Putin is quite possibly declaring war. More on all of that later, but first, here's a look at the latest headlines. Russia expels 6 British diplomats accusing them of spying and sabotage ahead of talks between Keir Starmer and Joe Biden on the next steps in supporting Ukraine with missiles. Reports say the United Arab Emirates will seek to revive a multi-billion-dollar deal with the United States for F-35 jets and armed drones if Donald Trump wins a second term as president. For the first time, North Korea shows images of centrifuges that produce fuel for its nuclear bombs as its leader Kim Jong-un visits a uranium enrichment facility. Union members at Boeing go on strike for the first time in 16 years after overwhelmingly rejecting a proposed 4-year contract with a troubled aircraft manufacturer. And Senegal's president dissolves the opposition-dominated parliament and calls for new elections on November 17th, which is likely to give him the majority needed to implement his policy agenda. We begin in the United States and the race for the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign has mocked former President Donald Trump as a chicken man. On a post on X, the Harris campaign suggested that Trump was chickening out of another debate. This after the Republican nominee said he will not participate in a second presidential debate with Kamala Harris. The former president shared a long message on his social media platform Truth Social and said a debate against Kamala Harris wasn't needed as he won Tuesday's presidential showdown. A Snap poll of viewers who watched the debate shows that Kamala Harris won by a margin of nearly 30 points. Further adding insult to injury, Republican strategist and former advisor to President George W. Bush, Karl Rove, penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal labeling Trump's debate performance as catastrophic. Meanwhile, during a rally in North Carolina on Thursday, Vice President Harris called for another debate with Donald Trump.
Trump and I had our first debate. And I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate. Because this election and what is at stake could not be more important.
The vice president called Trump's performance the same old show without any concrete plan for the American voters.
On Tuesday night, I talked about issues that I know matter to the families across America, like bringing down the cost of living, investing in America's small businesses, protecting reproductive freedom, and keeping our nation safe and secure. But that's not what we heard from Donald Trump. Instead, and I called it at the beginning of the debate, it was the same old show. Same old tired playbook we've heard for years, with no plan for how he would address the needs of the American people. Well, folks, look, it's time to turn the page.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump was on the campaign trail in the battleground state of Arizona, where he said 2 debates were sufficient for this election cycle.
She immediately called for a second debate, which means that she was like a prize fighter that lost a fight. We had 2 debates, though. I had a debate with crooked Joe Biden, right? And I had another debate with her. So because we've done 2 debates and because they were successful, there will be no third debate.
The ex-president accused the debate moderators of being biased and going easy on the vice president. However, a slew of polls released post-debate show Kamala Harris opening a noticeable lead over her opponent. A Reuters Ipsos poll shows the vice president opening a 5-point lead over the convicted felon with a 47-42 spread. Even more astounding, following Taylor Swift's endorsement of Kamala Harris, there's been a 400 to 500% increase in voter registration. Between 9,000 and 10,000 people per hour are signing up to vote, according to one data research firm. An aggregate of national polls shows Harris with a nearly 3-point lead with about 50 days to go. Moreover, in key states like North Carolina and Wisconsin, the race until Tuesday was seen as razor thin and is now beginning to show the Democrat beginning to open a lead. The latest Marquette poll shows a 4-point lead for Harris in the battleground state of Wisconsin and a 3-point lead in the Republican stronghold of North Carolina. In many respects, Donald Trump is wise to stay off the debate stage, but Harris is now seemingly on a glide path to winning, and the GOP nominee needs to desperately find a way to blunt her momentum. Otherwise, with polls showing numbers like these, Harris could usher in a blue wave in November, leaving Trump's Republican Party completely out of power, both in Washington and beyond. And now from the political battles of the campaign trail to Trump's ongoing legal battles. A Georgia court on Thursday dismissed 2 criminal charges in the 2020 election interference case against Donald Trump. Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee ruled that state prosecutors lack the authority to bring charges related to the alleged filing of false documents in federal court. These charges were part of a broader case accusing Trump and his allies of attempting to overturn the results of Georgia's 2020 presidential election. The decision also saw the dismissal of 1 additional charge against Trump's co-defendants, including Attorney John Eastman and Georgia State Senator Sean Still. However, the judge allowed the remaining charges against Donald Trump to move forward, including 8 counts that the former president still faces. Donald Trump, along with 14 other co-defendants, have all pled not guilty to racketeering and related charges. Prosecutors allege that Trump and his co-defendants were part of a conspiracy to illegally overturn the former president's narrow loss in Georgia during the 2020 election. In response to Georgia court's latest decision, Donald Trump's lawyer, Steve Sadow, said that the ruling demonstrated Trump and his legal team had quote-unquote prevailed once again. However, despite the dismissed charges, the racketeering charge, perhaps the most significant part of the case, still remains. The case, though, is currently on hold as Georgia Appeals Court considers whether Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis should be disqualified. Donald Trump's legal team argued that Willis engaged in misconduct due to a past romantic relationship with a former top deputy. As the former president continues to campaign for the White House, the Georgia case remains one of several legal battles Trump continues to fight. And now shifting focus to the war in Europe, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned NATO of a direct war if they allow Ukraine to strike inside Russia with Western-made weapons. Putin's comments came after the United States said it was considering lifting restrictions on Kyiv's use of long-range Western missiles to target Russian territories.
If this decision is made, it will mean nothing less than the direct participation of NATO countries, the United States, and European countries in the war in Ukraine. This is their direct participation, and this, of course, significantly changes the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are fighting against Russia. And if this is so, then, bearing in mind the change in the very essence of this conflict, we will make appropriate decisions based on the threats that will be created for us.
During a recent visit to Kyiv, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there could be a broader strategic shift among NATO partners. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden is meeting British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the White House to discuss Ukraine's use of long-range weapons. Other NATO countries, including the UK and Poland, have also appeared to be increasingly open to the possibility of allowing Ukrainian forces to use their weapons deep inside Russia, a move that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been pressing since the war began.
As the West, we should continue to deliver advanced air defense systems and also, in our opinion, lift restrictions on the use of long-range weapons. We are convinced the economic sanctions are effective, and at the same time we appeal for taking more decisive actions on confiscating frozen Russian assets.
Meanwhile, Putin has raised doubts that Ukrainian forces aren't capable of using cutting-edge Western missile systems without NATO's assistance.
The Ukrainian army is not capable of striking with modern long-range precision systems of Western manufacture. It cannot do this. This is only possible using intelligence data from satellites, which Ukraine does not have. This data is only from satellites of the European Union or the United States, in general, from NATO satellites. Flight assignments for these missile systems can, in fact, only be entered by military personnel of NATO countries. Ukrainian military personnel cannot do this. Therefore, we are not talking about allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. We are talking about making a decision about whether NATO countries are directly involved in the military conflict or not.
Tensions are in fact running high after the Pentagon confirmed that Moscow received short-range ballistic missiles from Tehran to use against Kyiv. NATO countries, including the United States, Britain, Germany, and France, have slapped Iran with sanctions over its weapons delivery to Russia. However, Ukraine has said these sanctions don't go far enough and has threatened to sever diplomatic ties with Tehran. Controversy's favorite son, Elon Musk, is at it again. This time, the target of his rage is the Australian government. In a one-word tweet, the tech billionaire called Australia fascist. Musk is furious over Canberra's new laws that crack down on misinformation on social media. The Australian government officials hit back at Musk, calling him a crackpot. Here's more on the ongoing back and forth.
Elon Musk has stirred controversy once again. This time, it's over Australia's new legislation aimed at tackling misinformation on social media. The billionaire behind X called the Australian government fascists in response to proposed laws that would fine social media companies up to 5% of their annual turnover for failing to curb false information. In the proposed bill, Australia gives the country's communications watchdog greater power to monitor and regulate content. If social media companies don't self-regulate, the watchdog can enforce an industry code of conduct or create its own standards.
The bill positions Australia to be at the forefront of tackling this growing international problem, one which threatens to undermine our civic discourse and democratic engagement and participation. This bill ensures that digital platforms are accountable for combating mis- and disinformation on their services.
Musk's fiery one-word retort came after a post about the measures went viral. Fascists, he tweeted. This triggered an immediate response from Australian officials. Federal Minister Bill Shorten accused Musk of flip-flopping on free speech, pointing out how the tech mogul had more positions on free speech than the Kama Sutra. Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones didn't mince words either. He labelled Musk's remarks as crackpot stuff and added, "I can't understand how Musk, or anyone for that matter, thinks it's okay for social media to spread scam content, deepfakes, child pornography, or even live stream murder scenes." He further emphasized the bill is about protecting the public, not stifling free speech. However, this is not the first showdown of X versus Australia. Musk has had run-ins with the Australian authorities before. In April, Australia's e-safety commissioner ordered X to remove graphic footage of a Sydney bishop being stabbed. Musk, in typical style, accused the government of suppressing free speech. The standoff continued for months, with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese even calling Musk an arrogant billionaire. Although the court proceedings were eventually dropped, Musk's company is still embroiled in at least 7 legal battles with the e-safety commissioner. And it's not just in the island nation down under, but Musk's stance on free speech has come under fire globally too. X was recently banned in Brazil after it refused to remove far-right anti-democratic content following the January 2023 riots in Brasilia by supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro. Now, despite his vocal opposition to government intervention, Musk's vision of free speech on X has faced harsh criticism. And the battle over Australia's misinformation law may be just the latest chapter in Musk's global struggle with regulators and governments over how to balance free speech with public safety online.
And finally, how much right-wing is too much right-wing? If you don't have the answer, well, there's someone in Italy that surely does. And that someone is Rachele Mussolini, the granddaughter of the late fascist Italian leader Benito Mussolini. She's decided to quit Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party and is joining hands with Forza Italia, which has been seen as more liberal. She says the Brothers of Italy, which traces its roots to a neo-fascist group set up by the supporters of her grandfather Mussolini, is too right-wing. Our final report has the story.
In the face of the First World War, fascism ignited a growing nationalist movement across Europe. Italy was no different. Here, leading the way to fascism was Benito Mussolini, a ruthless and brutal dictator who amassed a strong following, toppled Italy's government, but eventually fell to disgrace. Over a century later, Mussolini's own are abandoning his ideals. Rachele Mussolini, granddaughter of Italy's wartime dictator, has said she's leaving the Brothers of Italy party. The 50-year-old leader says it's too right-wing. Rachele Mussolini said she was leaving Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's party and joining Forza Italia, which is part of Italy's ruling coalition but is perceived to be more liberal on civil rights. She said, "It's time to turn the page and join a party that I feel is close to my moderate and centrist sensibilities." Mussolini won the most votes of any candidate at the last council elections in Rome in 2021. But recently, she had a fallout with the Brothers of Italy over minority rights. Known for her support for LGBTQ+ rights, Rachele Mussolini said she never liked the fascist salute which some party members still perform at commemorative events. In August, she had a face-off with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni amid a row over the gender of Algerian boxer Iman Khelif, who fought against Italy's Angela Carini at the Paris Olympics. In the first 46 seconds of the bout, Italy's Carini gave up against Iman Khelif, who later went on to win the gold medal. Meloni had said that the match was not between two equals because Khelif had failed a gender eligibility test at the World Championship in 2023. Responding to this, Mussolini said Khelif had suffered an unworthy witch hunt. The Brothers of Italy, or the Fratelli d'Italia, traces its roots to a neo-fascist group called the Italian Social Movement, or the MSI. The MSI was set up after the Second World War by supporters of Benito Mussolini's regime and former high-ranking members of his fascist party. Giorgia Meloni's party still shares its logo with MSI, but the Italian Prime Minister has tried to distance herself from the far right in recent years. In 2022, she said the Italian right had handed fascism over to history. She also told her party that it should expunge from its ranks anyone who idolizes Italy's fascist past. Earlier this year, when an investigation released video of members of the Brothers of Italy's youth wing making fascist salutes, Meloni said she was angry and saddened that their actions damaged the group's reputation. She says her party is mainstream conservative. But critics say the attempt to shed off the fascist image is mainly window dressing. Since taking office, Meloni's government has taken a hard line on immigration, abortion, surrogacy and same-sex parenting. And among those critics now is also Mussolini's own Rachele Mussolini.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you for tuning in and for tuning in all week. We hope you have a great weekend and we look forward to seeing you right back here next week. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired.
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.